Run, children, run. There have been many accounts of ghoulish stories from Halloween. Stories of murder, stories where people disappear, never to be seen or heard from again. Stories of tricks and treats gone wrong. Stories of the macabre, stories of monsters and ghosts. Stories of visitations from another dimension, from people long since dead. Blood-curdling stories. Stories that have no reason or explanation. Stories that have no happy ending. Then there are the stories of everyday life, and how even the most ordinary lives can be visited on All Hallows Eve. This is such a story, I warn you. You may not like what you hear. You may have nightmares for some time to come. Are you ready? Are you truly ready? The country house wasn't what you would usually associate as a house in the country. It wasn't big. It didn't have a long driveway through an arch of trees where you would magically arrive at a mansion with gigantic pillars and steps leading to huge oak front doors. No, it wasn't like that at all. The house was next to an empty field where nothing ever grew. Well, that's not strictly true. Every Halloween, the farm would position hundreds of pumpkins for families to come and pick, as if they had grown out of the ground. Then at Christmas, you could drive in and pick up a Christmas tree, but they didn't grow in the field. Nothing ever grew in the field. The village was called Nicholas, and had been since the early 1700s. There used to be a chapel, apparently, but not any longer. Now it is country houses, farms, and a small village with a post office and an even smaller shop. Mary called up to her children, "AJ, are you up?" AJ was not the initials of one child, but actually two children, Andy and Jenny. Andy was nearly 12 and was as mischievous as he could be, while Jenny was 8, and everything had to be just right. There had to be order in her world. AJ was the easy way that their mum directed something to them both, and today it was time for breakfast. Andy and Jenny appeared out of their bedrooms at the same time and raced each other downstairs. Andy always won. He was faster and stronger, and if necessary could and would use force to win. Today it was pushing Jenny into the railings at the top of the stairs that gave him another win. They both sat down to their cornflakes. Andy poked out his tongue at his sister and mouthed the words, "I beat you." Jenny didn't rise to his game and ignored him and dispensed a spoonful of sugar over her cereal. Just then, Andy looked out the kitchen window and saw a field of orange. "Mum, look, there are thousands of pumpkins in next door's field. Can we have one, Mum, please, please?" Mary held her tea towel tight in her hands and quietly said, "You know your stepdad doesn't believe in Halloween or want to spend money on such trivial things." She held the towel even tighter, considering how much she now sounded like Jack, her husband, the children's stepfather. How did life change so drastically for her? One minute her husband Neil was alive and everything was happy, and the next thing, a heart attack took him. Not even a goodbye, no time for a goodbye, just gone, dead. Andy was only 5 and Jenny was just about 1 when Neil was taken. Life had been different with Jack, their stepdad. It all started out so well and was wonderful to have a man about the house. Then the arguments started. The children cower and hide every time he comes home from work. Mary tells herself this is a life now and the children have to accept it. She digs her hands in a bowl of dishes and all of a sudden catches a finger on the knife and draws blood. She picks up the tea towel again to stem the bleeding and protecting her children from seeing her hurt, and now crying, as she often did these days, quietly to herself. Come on, children, now, please. The school bus will be here soon." In minutes the children are gone, Mary stares at the field of orange and shouts, "Why did you leave me, Neil? Why?" Mary sees to a cut and bandages a finger. It'll do for now. Days go by quickly and the weekend arrives. Andy looks from his bedroom out across the field next door in the moonlight. The light touches the pumpkins and Andy has an idea. He smiles one of his usual smiles, a knowing smile that nothing will change. The front door opens downstairs and it is as if the house grows cold. "What, no greeting? Mary, where's my dinner?" Mary rushes into the kitchen, opens the grill door where she's been keeping Jack's dinner warm. You're late, Jack, but your dinner should be hot enough." "What the hell do you call this, woman?" Jack picks up the plate, burns his hand, and throws the plate and the contents across the kitchen. Andy and Jenny stay upstairs listening to the onslaught and what they know will happen next. Jenny covers her ears, shutting out all the sound. Andy stares out at the field. His smile returns. "Jenny, I've got an idea. I'm going to go into the field and take a pumpkin and keep it in the shed, and we can decorate it. What do you think?" Andy looked at Jenny, but her eyes were tight shut and her fingers were in her ears. Andy threw a pillow at her. Jenny looked at Andy. "I said I'm going to steal a pumpkin from the field next door. Do you want to come with me?" "No! If Jack catches us, he'll be in so much trouble, and he might hurt Mum again." Andy thought hard and bit down on his lip through clenched teeth, said, "With or without you, I'm going." Jenny's eyes were wide, frightened for her mum downstairs and now frightened for Andy. "When are you going?" "Tomorrow night. It's Saturday and Jack'll probably come home drunk again. So when he's fast asleep, I'm going through the hole in the fence. You know, the one at the back of our shed." "Oh, okay. I'll come with you. I don't want to be home if Jack wakes and finds you gone." Jack went off to work before Andy and Jenny felt it safe to come down for breakfast that day. Jack worked in construction. He was a big man and his hands were rough and hard. He always seemed angry at something, and quite often it was them. It was good he had gone for the whole day. Andy and Jenny appeared for breakfast and noticed their mum was walking with a limp. "Mum, are you okay? What have you done?" Jenny asked. Mary smiled and said, "Silly me. Didn't see the last stair and tried to walk down the last two at the same time. I've twisted my ankle, that's all." Jenny laughed, but Andy thought something more sinister had happened. But why would Mum lie about something like that? Mum never lies. Mum just never lies. So he accepted it as the truth. "Sit down, both of you. I've got something to tell you." Mary sat with the children and collected herself for the news she felt she had to tell them. News that even she could not believe she was imparting. News so devastating that she needed to tell someone. And there was only them. She hadn't even told Jack about it yet, so it had to be their secret for now. "How do you feel about having a baby brother or sister?" "Nah, we're fine as we are," said Andy. "I'd love a baby sister," Jenny shouted excitedly. Mary laughed. "We have to keep this a secret until I tell Jack. You have to promise me. Do you promise?" AJ as one said, "We promise." Jenny thought, another promise. "I'll explode at this rate." Jack came home very late and as usual drunk. Mary kept out of his way and he trundled up to bed and slept where he lay. Mary knew at such times to sleep in the spare room, and tonight, seeing him drunk and asleep, she removed his shoes and was thankful of not having to listen to his shouting or worse. "Jenny, wake up. It's nearly 1 o'clock. We have to go. Be quiet." "I'm tired," Jenny whispered. "Come on, get your trousers and boots on. It may be muddy in the field." Quietly the children made their way to the back door, and both disappeared into the cold night air and around to the back of the shed. Andy helped Jenny through the hole in the fence. Both of them stood there surveying the pumpkins. "I want the biggest one we can carry, Jenny." "Can't we just take this one? It's closer," asked Jenny quietly. No, there are two of us. We could do this, and we'll hide it behind the shed, and then come out tomorrow to carve a face on it. Jenny laughed. Okay, but let's be quick. The field was muddy, and even with boots on, Andy and Jenny were having trouble walking to the middle of the field. The night was silent, and a mist was descending across the field. But this mist didn't come down from above, no. This mist appeared like an unwelcome apparition. It seemed to touch the perimeter fencing surrounding the field, as if asking permission to enter. Andy, I'm frightened. Look at the mist. It's coming across the field. It's heading right for us. Okay, let's hurry. Look at that one. It's huge, Andy whispered. We will never carry that one. It's almost as big as me. They both laughed, quietly trying not to giggle. Hey, look, there's a wheelbarrow. We can use that and push it across the field. Andy went off to get the wheelbarrow as Jenny stood looking at the mist. It was getting closer. It seemed to be drifting up and down trees and around bushes. Just then, something happened that made Jenny jump and almost scream out loud. Andy grabbed her leg and made a strange, horrible noise. I'm Pumpkin Man coming to get you. They both laughed again. Jenny said, let's lift it in the barrow. Andy's excitement at finding probably the biggest pumpkin in the field, combined with finding the wheelbarrow, was an overexuberance, as neither could lift the pumpkin off the ground. It wasn't just heavy, it was an awkward shape, and as we know, pumpkins don't have handles. Andy used all his strength and might, and the pumpkin finally moved, just a little at first. Andy, come on, help me lift it. Andy! What? Shouted Andy in a muffled voice. The mist. It's all around us. Jenny's lips started quivering. Okay, let's go back. We'll do what you said and get one near the fence opening. Even Andy felt worried that the mist seemed to have a life of its own. He knew it was only his imagination playing tricks, but his sister was beside herself. No, really. He looked at Jenny, and alongside her was another Jenny, with one big difference. The other Jenny had a large pumpkin head on her shoulders. Same clothes, same boots, same Jenny, but a pumpkin head. Andy wiped his eyes and stared at Jenny again. She was Jenny, only one now. Just Jenny. We have to go, Andy said. Now. Jenny looked around. Which way, Andy? Andy and Jenny stood in the middle of the field. Not a tree, not a fence, not a trace of where they had come from, and not a clue which way was out. All there was the mist. And a sound. At first it was a small sound, but it seemed to be coming from under the ground. What is that, Andy? I don't know. A small earthquake, maybe. Andy didn't know. All he did know was he had to get her home. The sound was no longer one sound, but a number of sounds coming from beneath. One of the sounds became a rumble that both Andy and Jenny could feel under their feet. Just then, something so disturbing happened that it made Andy and Jenny scream. Not a loud scream, but a silent scream held in by the mist. A headstone projected itself out of the ground, breaking the earth and forcing Andy and Jenny to step back. They were fixed to the ground and unable to move. Another headstone emerged, then another, and another. The moon was the only light penetrating the mist. It acted as a torch and shone brightly on the headstone in front of them. They couldn't read the name or date, but they knew there was some engraving on the stone, and that it was a grave. No wonder nothing grows in the field, said Andy. Why? Cried Jenny with tears appearing in her eyes. There must have been a graveyard here at one time, and they left the graves and buried them in more earth. I don't care which way we go. Can we go now? Jenny was shaking and Andy held her hand. Fingers pressed into the palm of Andy's hand, and as Andy squeezed, the fingers snapped. He looked down and saw a skeleton, moving, holding his hand. Andy let go quickly, and the skeleton reached out with another hand. Andy grabbed Jenny's arm, and they both ran. The mud seemed to be thicker, and although they were running, it was more of a stroll than a run. The field was now alive. Well, actually dead, but alive. "Are we going the right way?" Jenny shouted. I don't know, but whatever you do, don't look back." Of course, whenever anyone says don't look down or don't look behind you, don't look back, well, you just have to, don't you? Jenny looked behind her, and the figure she saw racing across the field was a giant. She looked again and could make out what it was. Andy said, "Yes, he's got a giant pumpkin head on. Run, faster, faster." The mud was heavy and pulling at their boots, slowing them down to almost a walk now. They found some harder ground and for the first time actually ran. All the way in every direction there were headstones and skeletons emerging from the ground. The skeletons reached out to grab at them. Andy saw one reaching for Jenny, and Andy let out a kick and watched as the skeleton's head was catapulted into the air. He looked back to see the skeleton's hands and arms touching the shoulders where the head had been. Andy thought, now that is really weird. Then they heard it. A grumble. Getting closer, getting louder. Then there was a roar. The giant pumpkin figure was gaining ground and getting ever closer. There was a gap in the mist, and Andy said, "I can see the gate." Then something happened that would end all hope of getting away. Pumpkins appeared and mounted on top of one another until the gate could not be seen. Skeletons were stacking them so high there was no escape. "It's okay, Jenny. I know the way now. We go along the fence to the hole. It's about 30 yards. Quickly." Andy knew that their journey to the hole in the fence was not going to go well. Jenny screamed the loudest scream just as the giant emerged from the mist. It stood up tall and must have been about 8 feet. A light appeared in their house. Andy thought, "I hope that's Mum." The giant pumpkin figure put his twig-like hands up to his ears. Do pumpkins really have ears? Another revelation. "Scream again," shouted Andy. Jenny screamed louder and longer and carried on screaming just enough time for them to find the hole in the fence. Andy dived through and reached to help his sister, but something or someone had other ideas. Jenny shouted, "It's got my legs. Andy, pull me, don't let go." Andy held Jenny's hands tightly, but he knew that he was no match for the giant's strength. Jenny pleaded, "Don't let go, Andy. Please don't let go." Andy knew he was going to lose his sister to whatever was on the other side of the fence. He could feel he was losing his grip. Now their fingers were crooked at fingertips, and the only thing holding them binding each other. "I love you, Jenny," and he knew that the next few seconds were the last he would ever see his sister again. Andy lost his grip. The end. Did you enjoy that story? Well, it's not really the end, is it? At that very moment, a white-gloved hand grabbed Jenny's wrist. Andy repositioned his grip on Jenny's other hand. The voice behind Andy said, "Pull with all your might, Andy." Andy didn't know who this stranger was, or how he knew his name, but now was not the time for questions. There was something that Andy could only liken to shiny gold dust, and with one hard pull, Jenny was free, and through the hole in the fence to safety. Jenny was free. Yes, she was. Yes, she lost her one boot, but she was free. She hugged Andy so tightly. "Thank you, Andy. You didn't let go. You saved me." A deep voice from behind said, "There was a reason this village was once called St. Nicholas, and not just Nicholas." Andy looked around, and there was no one behind him. No one with him. No white-gloved hand. Andy hugged Jenny again. The mist in the field was lifting, and all was quiet once more. Just then, the rear door of the house burst open, and an angry figure appeared. I'll teach you waking me up, with all that noise and screaming, you brats." Jack was standing there leaning on the rear porch to help straighten himself. Jack undid his leather belt and pulled it from his trouser waistband. The belt dangled from his hand, and Andy placed his sister behind him. Jack spat onto the rear porch. "You're not my kids. You deserve this." The voice behind him shocked Jack for a moment. Mary stood there. "They are not your children, Jack, but the one inside me is your child." Jack looked at Mary, then down at her stomach. We're having a baby?" For a moment Mary saw the man she had fallen for, a gentleman, a kind man, a caring man. But then the ogre came forcing his way back to the front. His face contorted and changed into the angry man he had become. Jack grimaced. "I don't want your children, so why the hell do I want one with you?" Mary had tears in her eyes, but stood strong. "You'll never lift a belt to my children." Jack saw a look of defiance and made a gesture towards her with a raised hand and belt, but she did not move. There was that gold dust again. Andy strained to see in the darkness and could just make out a large figure at the side of the house. Then it was gone. Mary also saw the dust, which seemed to shimmer in the moonlight and slowly descend. Jack could not move his hand. He couldn't move his arm. In fact, for the briefest time, he was stuck. He couldn't say anything, couldn't move a muscle. His arms, legs, body, and mouth would not work. The belt was no longer hanging down. It was standing up in the air. "AJ, in the car, now!" Andy grabbed Jenny and they ran to the car. Mary walked up to Jack and quietly said, "This is my home. I want you out. Gone." Mary revved the car and roared out of the drive, looking in the rearview mirror to see Jack racing down the drive, yelling, "I'm not going. I own this house now." The long front seat was big enough for the only family she needed. Andy said, "How can we go back, Mum? Jack won't let us back in." Mary knew he was right and extended her arm around her children. She glimpsed down to her stomach. What will the future be like for this one? Whatever it would be, they would be together as one family. Without Jack, no more anger, no more beatings, no more covering up the bruises, cuts or swellings. "It's okay, kids. We'll get Jack evicted. It'll be okay." Jack swung open the fridge door and took out 2 bottles of beer. He broke the cap off the first bottle and emptied the contents without taking a breath. Some of the beer drizzled its way down his chin and neck, and he wiped the dregs with his shirt. He tried 3 times to hit the counter with the cap on the second bottle of beer, and finally it squirted everywhere. Jack laughed. "She'll be back. She won't get far without me. I've got a house. Now it's my house." Jack settled down at the same time the mist descended on the field outside for the second time. Not that Jack noticed. Jack fell fast asleep, but he did wake up. Oh yes, he did wake up. He heard a sound from afar and thought maybe Mary had seen the error of her ways and brought the brats back. He tried to get up and fell against the chair. "Keep the noise down, will you?" Jack shouted, but no one would hear. Jack staggered to the kitchen window, and what he saw made him think he was more drunk than he had first realized. "Well, that can't be." He laughed to himself and strained his eyes out. He emptied the final remnants of his beer bottle and discharged the empty bottle across the kitchen. "Skeletons opening the side gate to the field. I am really drunk. It's those kids. They've come back trick-or-treating, taunting me. I'll show them." Jack picked up a knife from the draining board, but before he made another move, he saw something coming through the gate. Something so large that it couldn't be the children dressed up in costume. It had a huge pumpkin as a head, and it was lit up with eyes and teeth. The mist moved through the gate as if accompanying the huge pumpkin-headed beast, and Jack was riveted watching it as it grew bigger and bigger. There was only one voice in the night, one voice from the mist. It was a roar that made Jack put his hands to his ears. He forgot he had the knife in his hand and cut his head, and felt a trickle of blood run down his cheek. Jack turned the light off as he heard the approach of someone coming into the home. There were footsteps on the back porch and the sound of branches scraping the door and trying the door handle. Jack started talking to himself. I've got to hide. I've got to get away. Yes, hide. That's good. Be quiet. Upstairs. I've got to go upstairs. Jack ran as fast as his staggering legs would carry him. He wet himself as he mounted the stairs and hid in the corner of the bedroom. He still had the knife in his hand and he held it out in front of him, in the darkness. In this bedroom there was no moonlight, just total darkness. The only sound was his heartbeat. He couldn't hear any noises downstairs. Maybe it's gone. Maybe it's gone, of course it is, it's the drink. The beast could smell the fresh blood and pee. And, well, I could read the rest of the story, but I thought maybe on this All Hallows Eve, you'd prefer to hear the ending yourself. Happy Halloween, if there is such a thing.